What's going on? It's fight season MMA here, and today I'm going to be doing a video on my most highly anticipated matchups that the UFC should put together. Now, this isn't a fight news video, this is just a very fun video that I wanted to do where I'm putting some of the best fighters in each of the 8 men's divisions within the UFC just to see if they would be some fun matchups and see what you guys would like, but I think that these would be some really nice matchups to put together for the organization for Apex main events, regular main events, and even some of them could be title fights. So let's get right to the video right now. Okay, first fun fight that I want to do is starting in the flyweight division and moving through the ranks to the heavyweight division is starting with Brandon Royval versus Steve Erceg. I think this would be such an entertaining fight due to the striking styles of each two clashing. Now, Steve Erceg is just someone who went on a 4-fight winning streak within the UFC, and we really didn't know who he was until that Matt Schnell knockout, even though Matt Schnell has a chin of glass. That was a very nice, crisp left hook that he caught Matt Schnell with, and that propelled him to a title shot since Alexandre Pantoja ran through the other people in the division. And to many surprise, Steve Erceg did great in that fight, and most people think he won, even though he did not get the decision. Now, him fighting Brandon Royval will be such an interesting fight. Brandon Royval is a very risky fighter. He's one of my favorite fighters to watch because he throws everything on the line. You never know what's coming. The knee knockout versus Matthias Nicolau was absolutely insane. The elbow combinations, the spinning back fists, the different things, the knees, the use of all of his limbs is so incredibly good, and matched with Steve Erceg, who is such a good striker, as shown in display in that Pantoja fight, and a very cerebral fighter. He's almost the opposite of Brandon Royval in the fact that he thinks through every single little thing that he does, where Brandon Royval is there to kill your head off, like that spinning back elbow that he hit Kai Kara-France with. That was absolutely nasty. I think this fight would be so good to bring as the co-main event to UFC Denver, as the co-headliner to Rose Namajunas versus Macy Barber. And I think that this would be the fight to do as a number one contender spot, considering how good Steve Erceg did versus Pantoja, and considering Brandon Royval just went in and beat Brandon Moreno at UFC Mexico. Next fight I got on the list is Davidson Figueiredo going up against Chito Vera. Now, Chito Vera just came off an awful loss to Sean O'Malley at UFC 299 in that championship main event in Miami, Florida. Truly, that was a very hard fight to watch, considering that Chito Vera just looked slower than O'Malley. He didn't know where to go. Now, in that 5th round, he started to pick it up, but it was a very hard fight for Chito Vera to win and ultimately to watch, considering that he got dismantled over 5 rounds pretty handily. I had that fight 50-44 with that 10-8 round coming in the 2nd round. Now, Davidson Figueiredo had beat Rob Font at UFC Austin in December, or last December, and then he recently just beat Cody Garbrandt, which was an incredibly underrated win, and I'm assuming a win that most people saw, but most people wouldn't give recollection to because of how good UFC 300 was, by defeating Cody Garbrandt by rear naked choke. This fight would be so good. Chito Vera's slow-moving style and the power going in the middle would just be insane. I love Davidson Figueiredo's fighting style, the way he puts in the takedown, the way he switches in the shots. Everything that he does is methodical and calculated, and he is still one of the strongest punchers at 135, even though he was a former flyweight. Now, Chito Vera has all the tools to win this fight. Now, do I really think he could? He definitely could. But Davidson Figueiredo, I think, is that more well-rounded fighter. Now, I would want Davidson Figueiredo to maybe fight Peter Yan, now, or Chito Vera to even fight Peter Yan, but since Peter Yan is out with a knee injury, why not have the two go against each other? And I think that this would be such an amazing fight to put on the main card of something like UFC 306 in the Sphere, which I think could be an amazing fight to put on for Mexican Independence Day. And for the featherweight division, you already know what this is. This is the fight that everyone wants to see, Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria. I think it's absolutely nonsense that Ilia Topuria is talking about Max Holloway having to bring the BMF title. Like Max said, if you're a true BMF, you shouldn't be asking for the title. Now, I was one of the few people who was warning others around me to watch out for Ilia Topuria when he came up. I had him beating Alexander Volkanovski in that fight. Now, I did not have it by 2nd round knockout, even though Ilia's calculations within that fight were absolutely superb. Now, Max Holloway brings a different aspect to the table than Volkanovski did. Even though Volkanovski moves and he throws a lot, Max Holloway keeps that constant pressure on you. He's also taller than you, where Volkanovski was shorter than Topuria. Uh, Max Holloway can get up on his car and go wherever he needs to go. He won't get trapped. He's super calculated. And like we saw in that Justin Gaethje fight, that spinning back kick comes out of nowhere, and he can do so much damage with that kick. Now, ultimately, I think that this should headline in the Sphere at 306, and possibly Sean O'Malley versus Merab Davishvili as the co-main event, or something like that. I know that Ilia Topuria wants to fight in Spain, but I ultimately don't think that's going to happen sometime soon. But this is the fight that needs to happen at featherweight. This is the fight that everyone wants. This is the fight that no one really knows how it's going to go, since Ilia Topuria is 14-0. We all know that he is probably the best, most well-rounded fighter within the UFC, besides John Jones at his age, minus his age. His skill set is truly superb. His pocket boxing is some of the best in the UFC. His grappling is top notch, and his IQ is insane. Now, him versus Max Holloway would be one of the best fights I could ever imagine, and this seems perfect to headline UFC 306 in the Sphere if Ilia Topuria is ready to come back early. And next fight I have at lightweight is I have Dan Hooker versus Rafael Fiziev. Now, I know Rafael Fiziev recently tore his ACL, or not recently, but back in a main event at the Apex September of 2023. Rafael Fiziev is so good, and I know he has a loss to Justin Gaethje on his record, but that was very close to being a win for Rafael Fiziev. Really, Rafael won the first round. The second round was close and got dismantled in the third round. But Justin Gaethje, as we know, beat Dustin Poirier. He's beat some of the greatest lightweights in UFC history, and to call that as one of your few losses on your record, Rafael Fiziev should not be ashamed. Now, in that last fight with Mateusz Gamrot, he won the first round, and sadly in the second round he tore his ACL. Now, going on to Dan Hooker, someone who recently broke his arm and broke his orbital in his fight against Jalen Turner. He had to pull out versus Bobby Green at UFC Austin. Now, this fight would be so amazing considering how good Dan Hooker is and how durable Dan Hooker is. Dan Hooker would be the bigger fighter by a lot in this standpoint, because Rafael Fiziev is pretty small for the division, even though it seems like he has a little bit of a harder weight cut, but he is so agile and so fast with his movements, his kicks, leg kicks. He has so much speed and so much power. Versus the toughness, the power of Dan Hooker. This fight would be so amazing to see those contracting sides of one another clash in the octagon. Dan Hooker is ranked, I think, 10th, and with Rafael Fiziev is ranked 8th. This would be such a good featured bout on a pay-per-view, or you could do this as a main event, and I would take that anywhere, and I would love to go see that fight. Now, for welterweight, we have a fight that should be the title eliminator for the next title shot. It is Jack Della Maddalena versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. This is such a good fight. Now, I was a big Jack Della Maddalena fan in his last fight against Gilbert Burns at UFC 299. I did have him losing. Now, ultimately, when he was in that fight, he was losing the fight. But shown throughout that fight was Jack's fight IQ. Every little thing that he was doing showed that Jack knew exactly where he was in the fight. He was doing it so methodically, so meticulously, that I was truly impressed by that performance. Now, on the flip side, you have Shavkat, which in that fight versus Jeff Neal was one of the lowest IQ moments I have ever seen. But Shavkat is such a beast that it doesn't even matter. Shavkat Rakhmonov is going to be a champion one day. I truly believe. He is so talented in his ability to not only take a shot, he has such good boxing, he's a great grappler, and he is just big for the size too and the weight. Shavkat has every single ability, intangibly and tangibly, to his disposal to truly become UFC champion and to have a reign like Kamaru Usman, to reign like these times like Leon Edwards. And I don't want to go on and say George St. Pierre, considering how amazing his reign was, but Shavkat has the ability to have a long-lasting reign at welterweight, and I truly believe he could beat most of, if not the welterweights in the top 15. Now, him versus Jack Della Maddalena is like a car crash waiting to happen. Jack's so smart in being able to calculate all of his moves, yet Shavkat is just going to be coming forward at all times. This fight has co-main event written all over it for a pay-per-view card. This fight would be so amazing to watch. I think this should be the co-main event at UFC Perth at 305. This would be such a good co-main event welterweight title eliminator with possibly a Dricus du Plessis, Israel Adesanya main event. This fight I would pay top dollar to watch, and I guarantee you this fight would win fight of the night. Now, within the middleweight division, I have Brandon Allen versus the loser of Hamzat Chimaev versus Robert Whittaker. Now, I think that this is such a great fight, considering that Brandon Allen is on the rise, and either him versus Hamzat would be such a good fight, or Brandon versus Robert, where Robert is kind of the gatekeeper of the top 5 of that division. There is so many people who can go in there, and truly, if you can beat Robert Whittaker, you can be a champion. You look at people like Israel Adesanya, Dricus du Plessis, who both beat Robert Whittaker and later to become champion. Now, I think that would be a great fight, but since Robert Whittaker is booked, and I think he has a very good shot at being Hamzat Chimaev, I wanted to throw him in the mix, considering of how fast-paced he is, of how good his grappling is, with an only slight concern with his cardio. Now, against Kamaru Usman, his cardio looked a little bit better, but it's still a concern versus Robert Whittaker, considering it is a 5-round fight. Brandon Allen is such a special fighter with his just sheer IQ and being able to move around the octagon and to be able to transition fluently through those grappling sessions and techniques to be able to spider net into something further, like a Darce choke or a rear naked choke, a heel hook like he used to get out versus Paul Craig, or a calf slicer, my fault. Anything he has is truly special, and I think Brandon Allen versus Hamzat or Robert Whittaker would be an amazing fight for a card that could possibly propel them into a title eliminator, or if Brandon Allen wins in a dramatic fashion, could. Okay, in the light heavyweight division, I have Carlos Ulberg versus Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker just came off a fight with Magomed Ankalaev, which he first fought in the desert in October 21st on that Islam Makhachev versus Volkanovski 2 card. We all know how that ended up, so he got the first main event of the first fight night of the year versus Magomed Ankalaev, which he got brutally knocked out in. Carlos Ulberg, on the other hand, just came off beating Alonzo Meadowfield in 12 seconds at UFC St. Louis, and I think that this would be such a good clash. You look at Johnny Walker's crazy style being number 7 or number 8th ranked in the light heavyweight division, and Carlos Ulberg's IQ, his technique, being able to give him a challenge as a younger fighter within the division, and Johnny Walker, who's someone who has fought Jamal Hill, Magomed Ankalaev, Anthony Smith, some of the best light heavyweights currently in the division, truly would be a great step up in competition for Carlos Ulberg, and would be a very fun fight to stick as a co-main of a fight night, or even a main event of a fight night I would take, or on the main card of something coming up. Now, lastly, in the heavyweight division, I have the fight that we want to see Cyril Gane fight besides Tom Aspinall, and that is Cyril Gane versus Sergey Pavlovich. Cyril Gane is a great fighter on the feet, and we know that, but there is no man scarier in that heavyweight division besides, Tom Aspinall held it great, but Sergey Pavlovich is a Russian killer. That man is insane. Just his walk-ins, his power, the way he goes in the octagon, that knockout versus Tai Tuivasa in a minute, his fight with Curtis Blades, him going to Derek Lewis, he is insane, and Sergey Pavlovich is one of the best fighters within that division, and truly is going who probably is going to fight Tom Aspinall another day for a title. Now, Cyril Gane, we all know he fought John Jones and isn't the best grappler, but I truly think that Cyril Gane has some of the cleanest kickboxing within the UFC. He is truly special in that category. Now, as Sergey Pavlovich presents, he is not really a grappler. He has some grappling ability, but doesn't really use it at all, mainly just a power puncher and a striker, which would induce a really fun heavyweight match, which we would get some very intense striking, probably a fight that doesn't last more than a round or two. And I say we stick this as the main event to UFC Paris if Sergey Pavlovich is able to knock out Alexander Volkov here coming up at UFC Saudi Arabia in June. Thank you guys for watching this video. Truly, I think that these fights would be some of the greatest fights for the UFC to put on, to not only adjust the rankings in each of the men's divisions, but also be some amazing fights for the fans to be able to endure. If you guys have any comments, please leave them down below. I'm doing my best to respond to everything. And please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't dropped a like on the channel or subscribe. Please do so. I'm going to be making MMA content almost daily, and my goal is to be able to grow this channel and to bring MMA content as much as possible to you guys and to inform everyone of what's going on within the MMA community. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon.